It is the fall equinox of 2025, being September 21st. And for this daily documentary entry of my traumatic brain injury recovery story, the fall equinox is enough of a subject to work with as far as finding balance. So, right to that medical end of a traumatic brain injury recovery. And gateway is what it's called when a person's struggling to have their balance. To go from a seated position to a standing position is a significant alteration with the neurochemical processing when it comes to the science of it. So, the transition, the gateway as they call it, is once standing. Is balance there, or I have to hold on to something? It's a long process of recovering from left side neglect that was hidden from the courts. So as I was explaining to someone yesterday how this was possible and what really happened in this simple timeline of documents, while I was at UMass Medical in Worcester, Massachusetts, airlifted there because the skull puncturing injury happened Route 202 in Peterborough, where my house was, and I was going to pick up a door on Route 202, headed to Beltates in Jaffrey to get an interior door. I was going to look at interior doors that were unfinished, unpainted, just plain. I was just looking for the simplest ways to do new door for my daughter Hannah's room because we had just painted her room. So going to look for a door is when the injury happened. So explaining to a person yesterday, airlifted because it was skull puncturing. I wasn't supposed to be able to survive something that bad. No one thought survival was possible, but the airlifting and 15 blood transfusions, whatever, and chemical induced coma. So on life support, I was airflown to UMass life support and miraculous life-saving surgery to get all the skull pieces out and keep me alive. So the chemically induced coma, I don't know how long I was in that. I think it was between 9 and 16 days from the documents I can find, because I can't get anyone that was filing the stuff to respond because they were all coordinating the same fraudulent attack. It appears that my parents coordinated the attack, but other people were just following court rulings that they were getting with their assistance through Tim Donovan, who was the expert and resident in Peterborough, knew traumatic brain injury survival as the owner of Robin Hill Farm. So this guy tactically knew exactly what to file, what to hide, because the people it was being filed to don't have educations in neuroscience. We're talking about the most complicated object in the known universe, the human brain. And the science attached to that is the most complicated subject. So the people like Tim that knew how to instruct people like Roger and Lynn had the parental trust of the courts. They followed the lead that Tim told them. Hide this info because he's never going to recover. It doesn't matter that he survived miraculously. He's not going to recover. Instead, we'll just maintain that status of medical incapacitated. And he can be at Robin Hill Farm and cha-ching, you guys get the property, insurance, liquidate the business, and I'll just keep on getting $700,000 or $900,000 a year for his name through the government by filing this way, and they all agreed. So they just needed me to not recover, and then they wouldn't have been questioned about the multi-million-dollar assault, and I'd be at Robin Hill Farm, in some wheelchair, in some room, heavily medicated, and Donovan would be cashing in $90K a year on me without question. So the records are suggesting that someone's been getting my income since injury, but I'm not permitted to know who. I'm not permitted by court rulings in place to have ledgers of these accounts. I'm not permitted by court rulings in place to have ledgers of my own Department of Health and Human Services records for the state of New Hampshire. I'm not permitted to have my federal end either. How is that possible? So this is where the conservator status of Lynn Howard, my blood mother, when I was in a coma and I was in that bad of a medical condition, Tim showed her how to file in such a way that they could fool courts, get just rulings. All they needed was rulings that suggested that this incapacitated person, then they could use that incapacitated medical filing that a court had already said this person needs this conservator and needs this guardian. And then they will just keep filing, claiming that the incapacitated person and my mother had the attachment to my identity, social security number and all, They made bank accounts in my name. They arranged all the funding for my care as if I was going to be normal. So on one end, they file and wheel me into court because I could speak like a medical anomaly. So I get wheeled into court while a patient of a hospital in years I'll never remember told to tell the judge you can take care of yourself, and apparently I did in the testimonies. And they were hiding all the actual medical info of how severe the condition was and that it was a flat-out medical anomaly speaking, because it wasn't supposed to be possible that I could speak. They did not inform Judge Quigley of that in Nashua at Probate Court 2015. Instead, while the patient of St. Joe's, this is where they did the tricky transfer. So at UMass Medical, all that skull had to be removed and the miraculous survival had occurred. So now the German doctor and brain surgeon there was getting the piece of skull manufactured. So the synthetic skull, however they do it, the miraculousness of it, I just refer to it as like it's New Age plexiglass. But either way, they had to wait for it to be manufactured. During that time of that being created, which was the 1916 whatever day period that I'll never remember and I can't really tell because no one will communicate. That was when Rodgers and Lynn had me transferred from UMass Medical. Instead of staying there and waiting for a new piece of skull, they sneakily took the miraculous speaking person and told no one the truth, but brought me to St. Joe's in Nashua. So now at St. Joe's in Nashua, at that hospital, is when now they file. And then when the skull piece was ready, they did the whole medical misinforming and misuse of the system. Oh, we'll have him go back there for that and then come back to St. Joe's. So just back to UMass just to have that skull put in. And they only did that for the timeline to maintain their documentation so they would have the ability to keep court rulings protecting the establishment of their banking fraud with Lynn the conservator. So it's medical identity theft is the summary I'm trying to give it, where when I was in a coma, Roger, Lynn, and Tim knew how to steal my medical identity and then misinform the courts with medical fraud to get unlawful rulings arranged with no one knowing and then operate since then with those unlawful rulings and continue blocking me from doing anything about it as they keep using the bank accounts they made in my name to keep stealing everything while telling the courts that they're blocking me personally from accessing any of that information and ledgers because I'm still in that incapacitated medical condition. So if I'm trying to access it, it's not actually me. They've got to protect my identity is what they are telling the courts. Well, they're the ones that are stealing everything and blocking me from doing anything about it. So psychiatric terrorism, modern day enslavement, they're just the captions I'm using of the most inhumane and brutal assault that's been done by my blood parents, assisted by Tim Donovan from Peterborough and his friend Jolene, it appears. They worked together. She's a LADAC and was his friend that he had introduced me to, and apparently he put her in my home after the injury to tell everybody that we were in a relationship we were never in. So before the injury, I had met her, I had dated, and after the injury, she doesn't come to the hospital, there's no communication, but Tim instructs her, tell everybody that you were in a relationship that you were never in, and we'll just make sure you get paid. And apparently Jolene went for it and assisted Roger, Lynn, and Tim with the arrangement to get herself pregnant while I was paralyzed in those years I don't remember. So she used the parts of my body that were operational and got herself pregnant and has since. Not that Tristan is a problem in my life that way, more of a gift, but she's weaponized this child to attack psychologically. It's for additional misuse of the New Hampshire courts. So now she's got a child that is my child, but she's misusing the courts to attack me psychologically with the child, with essentially child abuse. That's stuff I can't talk about it calmly because in the years I don't remember, she got herself pregnant. When Tristan was born in 2016, things begin. Because the other sensory perceptions begin firing up because now there was a newborn in the house. I was in a wheelchair with the use of one hand, but I was still determined to cook. So I was successfully finding ways to cook in my kitchen And then I had to successfully find ways to change a diaper because Jolene thought that with this child, they could weaponize attack and I'd melt down. Instead, the hardcore chef I've been working 70 plus hours a week since I was 13 years old. So from age 13 to 26, nothing but kitchens and then nothing but construction after that, self-employed. So to have to work 70 plus hours a week is okay. That's life. So the fact that there was a more vulnerable person in the home, and I knew that with a clarity that I had never had before, and at the same time, the inability to make new visual memory and all that insane neuroplasticity and how it alters perception, there was something that altered where I had to find a way to help a person more vulnerable who was a baby. And so no problem at all. It was automatic that I learned not only how to cook things, but how to change diapers with one hand. And so the calm communication, I realized, is what he needed as much as I did. It was this awkward like-mindedness that I had with him that I had never had before. And then that spawned the realization that there was something different about my perception since the injury and coming back to life, because I was able to recognize things that I hadn't recognized before, while becoming aware that there was a whole lot that I thought I could do before that I could no longer do, the mayhem. So anyways, this begins in 2016-17, that initial awareness. And so then from that, I'm asking questions, and I realize now the timeline up to 2019 is when the epiphany came, that I was able to remember that I was unable to remember. It took till 2019. So they had from 14 injury happening to 19. They had 5 full years of an onslaught, non-stop attack of my medical condition, trying to prevent recovery with the psychiatric terrorism of misinforming the entire state around me, including the banking system, WMUR, stealing of property, medical identity theft for all assets. They have not stopped attacking and taking with this arrangement of medical identity theft and aggressive neglect, while immunity from prosecution. They haven't stopped. Roger, LeComte, Lynn Howard, and Tim Donovan have not stopped. This has been a decade-long assault that began 12/4/2014, and they've laid out the documents, and they've got court rulings protecting those documents. So even though they're breaking the law by misusing the courts with medical fraud, they've got the courts to agree to protect them that no one can know about it. And that's when I start swearing, and I'm going to end the video.